say is, one, you are in an incredibly special place. The biodiversity of the Greater Brisbane area is pretty well unparalleled for the biodiversity of a city in a developed country. Pretty well unparalleled, and virtually nobody knows anything about it. Second point, Australia's biodiversity is in a mess, and the government isn't telling you because they aren't even counting it. Thirdly, why do I care about biodiversity? I thought the environment was all about turning off light bulbs and saving water. Well, this is where it's going to get a bit heated, I suppose. I'm going to suggest that I don't really care about carbon and water. I don't care at all about those things. Do you know why? Because people are going to sort them out, because they're going to die. People will work out a way to get water because we like to drink it. And if we don't, it's going to be miserable. And people will sort out climate change, because we don't sort it out, it's going to be miserable, and our economy is going to collapse. Well, it probably collapsed yesterday, but it'll collapse even more. But biodiversity is something that if we stuff it up, we pay the price for 2 to 5 million years. So then the fourth thing I'm going to ask you to think about is, what are people in a million years going to think about when they think about us? How are they going to judge us? They will care about biodiversity loss because in the next century it looks as though we will wipe out half the species in the planet. And unlike water, and unlike carbon dioxide, and unlike a whole heap of other aspects of the environment like air quality, they don't get fixed in 10 years. Half the species in the planet will take 2 to 10 million years to regenerate. You will be judged on your destruction of biodiversity. That's the big issue. That is always going to be the big environmental issue. We're just going through a little blimp where we get fascinated by things that are solved on a 5 and 10 year timescale, like water, air and climate. Now, a lot of people aren't going to like that because climate change, air quality and water quality are the flavour of the month. But I can tell you, in a million years' time, they're not the flavour of the month. They'll be well and truly sorted out. And then I'm going to end off my last point quickly talking about what you can do. And probably you're in a better position than anybody else on the planet for doing something about biodiversity, because we have more threatened species in this region and less people than anywhere else in the world. Okay, going back to point one, why is this a ridiculously special spot? Well, as I say, I can find 10% of Australia's bird fauna in an hour and a half wandering the suburbs of Brisbane. That's amazing, 10% of all the bird fauna. Australia itself is remarkably diverse. If you look at all the countries on the planet and say which country has the most species that are endemic to it, they're the species that only live in that country, Australia and Indonesia are it. They are well ahead of every other country in the planet in terms of endemic species. And secondly, if you take 12 countries on the planet, I don't know how many countries there are on the planet, I think it's about 200, isn't there? Anyway, they come and go. Of those 200 countries in the planet, if you just take 12 of them, they encompass about 70% of all the species in the planet. And Australia's one of them, and we are the only developed mega diverse country in the world. So we have ridiculous responsibilities for biodiversity. There's more interesting species per person in this country than any other place in the world. I mean, the Chinese have as much diversity as us, but they've got 1.3 billion people to look after it. We've got 20 million people. So if you really want to make a big impact for the 30,000 generations of Australians that will live after you, go and save a species. There are plenty out there to be saved. It isn't necessarily that hard. I can guarantee you can find a species of frog or bird or plant that virtually nobody in this country is even working on and knows anything about, and you can probably single-handedly save it. Why do we need to save it? Why isn't it such a mess? Now, most people don't think biodiversity is in so much of a mess, and it's probably because in Queensland it sort of looks all fairly rosy. But I can tell you, I come from Adelaide, and Adelaide cleared most of its native vegetation 50 years ago. If you walk into the Adelaide Hills and you look for birds, you will find that 10% of all the bird species in that area are gone. More than 50% of the mammals are gone. Only 7 frogs are gone. We've got about 100 species of frogs here. I think only a couple of them have gone. So there's enormous diversity in this area, But places like Southern Australia around Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth have massacred theirs. We are busy massacring ours. We are destroying native vegetation. Until 2 or 3 years ago, and the vegetation clearance legislation came through, we were massacring at a vast rate. And the thing about all those birds that have gone in South Australia, the 10% of the birds that have gone from the Adelaide Hills, they will continue to disappear for the next 200 years, not because we're chopping down trees, it's because of the extinction debt. So things go extinct long after you had an impact on them. There's this huge time lag. It's like turning the Titanic is like turning the tide of extinctions. And the Titanic in southeast Queensland has just seen the iceberg. Actually, I don't think most people have seen the iceberg. The iceberg of biodiversity loss is in the distance. But if we don't start turning now, it's going to be too late, because we've already wiped out 60 or 70% of our vegetation. Although we have good state vegetation clearance laws for agriculture, I can tell you every day of the week somebody is knocking over pieces of vegetation for development so that we can take another 60,000 people in southeast Queensland every year. So there's a big fight to be fought on stopping the destruction of the biodiversity of southeast Queensland, which is a biodiversity hotspot on a global scale. What do we know about the biodiversity of southeast Queensland? Well, there is a State of the Region biodiversity report that the state government have looked at. Do you know what they know about biodiversity in this entire region, with 3 million people in it who've been here for a long time? We have 3 counts of some koalas. We know there's 8 breeding pairs of red goshawk. This is the totality of the biodiversity state of environment report that the state government's going to possibly issue. And they said something about a couple of other threatened species. They haven't got any idea. They have no idea what's happening to the biodiversity of southeast Queensland, officially or publicly. I don't know what they're counting, but they're not counting anything. So big take-home message. If you want to do something good, you can do 2 things. You can go and save a species, but you know, if you just count anything for more than a few years, you're going to make a major impact on our knowledge about biodiversity loss in southeast Queensland. Just count anything you like. Count the butterflies, count the birds. I've been counting the birds for 5 years at Oxley Common. We took the only credible data we now have on bird decline in southeast Queensland is because Birds Queensland database their monthly outing data, and we've just analysed it. And we've found that 40 species are in serious decline and 30 species are increasing, things that are common and probably generally pests. That is the first time anybody's made a general statement about bird biodiversity in southeast Queensland. And I think the main message that I really want to push is this issue about what will people think of us in 1 million years' time, years into the future. Think about how the future will judge us. What will they say about what we do? And I can guarantee you they're not going to be impressed about a number of things. They will be deeply unimpressed about burning petrol in cars. They will not understand that. They will think that petrol was made for producing products like plastic and other things. But the one thing they will, but they can actually produce, you can produce fuels out of plants, so you can recover that. The only thing in 100 or 200 or 1,000 years' time, or even 1 million years' time, that's 30,000 generations' time away, that they cannot fix, that we did, the thing they cannot fix is biodiversity loss. You cannot make species, as far as I know, yet. They evolve very, very slowly. The diversity of the planet has taken millions of years to occur. A mass extinction like the one we're in the middle of now roughly takes, Scott can probably give you a good answer to this, it's going to take 2, 5, 10, 50 million years to recover from. And there's nothing they can do about it. That's what they're going to be worried about. So when you're thinking about what you can do for the environment, there's lots of things that everybody, I think, obviously should be doing about water, soil, where they get their food from, how they use carbon, how they use building materials like the previous session. But start to think about how you're going to be judged by your 30,000 great so-called grandchildren, and what they're going to think about your place in the world, because they will be very seriously annoyed. And then the final thing is, okay, I can do something, I can count something. Hugh's told me to go out with my binoculars and start with my notebook and count things, that'll be good. And that data will be actually eventually useful for convincing the government to do something about biodiversity. The most powerful thing anybody this place can do is just write one letter every year to the government, expressing their concern about, I really don't care what. But you know, a letter's worth 1,000 votes. So